Now we come to the end of the Iliad. What began with the ruinous wrath of Achilles being foretold that it would end in the souls of many warriors being thrown into Hades, we get to see firsthand. We have known that Achilles is a great warrior. Everyone says that Ajax is only second to Achilles, and we've seen Ajax on the battlefield. We've seen Odysseus be great in war, and what we'll find out later in the Odyssey is that the end of the Iliad, at the end of the Trojan War, Odysseus will actually receive Achilles' armor for being the greatest warrior after Achilles. And so we've got to see these men fight, sometimes in devious ways, as when Diomedes and Odysseus sneak over to the other side and spy and kill rather mercilessly. We have seen people slaughter each other and laugh at the death that they're causing and laugh at this violence. We've seen some pretty horrific Aristeia taking place, these extended scenes of glory that really are extended scenes of gore and lots of death on the battlefield as people have turned into lions and have roared as predator against their prey. But Achilles himself, the one who begins the poem, we have not seen him yet on the battlefield. We've seen his stand-in Patroclus, but this will be the first time that we get to see Achilles, and he does look rather merciless. He's juxtaposed with Hector, who the whole time we've been walking through this poem has seemed our most noble leader, our most noble victor, and the two of them are going to be in comparison with one another. Finally, we will end with the reconciliation, the note of hope that we talked about earlier, where Seamus Heaney says, and justice will rise up, and history and hope can rhyme. Perhaps there is some hope here at the end of this historical narrative that we can look to. If we compare Hector and Achilles, we see a version of Achilles that whether or not it is not how Achilles normally is in war, it is the only Achilles that we know in war. He covered his face with dark ash, he has all new armor on, and he goes out to meet his enemy Hector, who he has sworn to his dead friend Patroclus to slay and bring back his armament and his head. Hector is wearing Achilles' armor. And yet Hector, we know, is not at all like Achilles. We've seen very different characters from the two of them. On the one side, we've seen Hector with his family, laughing at his baby boy, playing with his son, taking off his helmet, praying over his son. We've seen his parents, Hecabe and Priam. We know his siblings, his relationship with Paris. We get to watch him with his wife in one of the most moving scenes in the book, in book 6, where he says, I would prefer not to fight. I don't want to kill, but I have learned to be brave. And he does not know his fate. He does not have any godlike ability to see into the future. He says at different points, maybe I will die, or maybe my son will outlive me and become a great man. Maybe I will take Achilles and kill him, or maybe he will kill me. But either way, he's always protecting the city that he lives in. He's fighting for Troy. He has a reason to fight that is noble. And he understands that death may happen and that death is part of life. He has watched many of his brothers die. He has watched many of his friends like Sarpedon and others die in battle. And yet he's accepted it and continued fighting for the last 9 years. In contrast is Achilles. Achilles has been isolated for much of the book. We only hear about his friendship with his mother Thetis and with his friend Patroclus, his only friend. We don't see him interact with a family. We don't even get to hear about his relationship with his father. We hear about it only from other people. We don't get a sense that Achilles knows community, that he has a friendship with those who are fighting with him among the other Greeks. When we watch him in war, then we'll get to see him be merciless, he's implacable, and he knows his fate. He knows he's going to die, and it seems to change his entire outlook on these last battle scenes. Death has made Achilles a different person. The death of Patroclus has made life seem unreasonable and confusing. He is in chaos. I don't know that we could go to the extent of a modern reader and say that death has now made life meaningless or nihilistic, but there does seem to be questioning the purpose of life at all. What is the purpose of a mortal soul? There's a beautiful moment in the Iliad in which Hector sounds very much like a modern character. You see in this illustration Hecabe and Priam, who are watching from the walls of Troy as their son flees from Achilles, and they run around the walls again and again and again. Hector stops, but prior to this run, so maybe I should back up. Prior to this run, Hector is watching Achilles charge at him, looking inflamed. Achilles looks like he's on fire in this new armor that Hephaestus has made for him and is charging towards him. And Hector stops and reflects on what he should do. Hector knows ultimately that he will not be able to reason with Achilles. Even if he gives back Helen and her possessions, that really has nothing to do with why Achilles is charging at him. This is not about the Trojan War. This is not even about Troy. It has become personal. Achilles is charging after Hector, and the two of them will not both come out of this fight. We have reason to fear for Achilles' life because of how Achilles has treated Hector's brother only moments earlier. He kills a young man, one of Priam's sons, named Lycoon. At an earlier part, it is mentioned that he had taken Lycoon for ransom. He didn't mind offering Lycoon back to the Trojans if Priam would pay a hefty sum and give Achilles time, give Achilles prizes in return for Lycoon. So Lycoon, knowing this, assumes the same thing will happen now and begs Achilles to save his life. In the speech that we just heard between Achilles and Lycoon, Achilles sounds like a different person than he was earlier in the war. He seems to reference a past self, a self that saw the point of mercy, a self that had nothing against Trojans, had nothing against Priam personally, but was in the war almost as a mercenary to receive time. He was fighting for things like Briseis. But at this point, it isn't about Briseis. It isn't about things. There is nothing that Priam could offer him that would be worth saving the life of Lycoon. We're all going to die, and therefore don't beg for your life. I am greater than you, Lycoon, and I'm going to die. Patroclus was greater than you, Lycoon, and he's going to die. It's all meaningless, except your fate. The fate is mortality. And Achilles is no longer listening to reason, to relationships. In some sense, he's not being what it is that it means to be a human being. Instead, the only thing it means to be a human being to him means that he's mortal, and he must kill as much as he can before that mortality takes him. The fight between Achilles and Hector is the penultimate battle. This really is the fight between the human and the inhuman, between what it means to be a human being embodied in Hector and what it means to be pure destructive force, which is embodied at this point in Achilles. And we see the two of them clashing. We see these two worldviews clashing in a sense. We have Hector of the city. We have Hector who tames horses. Hector who understands civilized life, family life, married life, life behind the walls. And we have the barbarian Greek Achilles who lives on a beach and lives in a camp and lives almost like an animal. And the two of them are fighting for two different ways of life, two different cultures, and the two of them are really engaging in two different worldviews that are fighting between, that we're watching the fight between. However, that being said, those of us who are listening are not thinking of all of those things as we're listening to this fight. Rather, we care for Hector and we hate Achilles at this moment, or at least I do when I'm reading this. Achilles is not someone you feel any sympathy for. You don't love Achilles. You don't feel sorry for Achilles. You are meant at this point to see his rage as all-encompassing, that the rage actually possesses the man, and the man is lost in the rage. And you see this in the interaction, this final interaction between them. Hector, again, like Lycoan, his brother, so again, with this patterning, this building of patterns, that Hector begs for his life and says, not just once, but twice. First, before they start fighting, if I fight you and I die, will you promise to give my body back to my parents as the gods would want you to? And Achilles says no. So they fight. Hector's about to die and says, please, above all things, do not give my body to the dogs. Give my body to my parents. And Achilles again says no. So not only is he being unreasonable, he's being irreverent towards the gods. He's being faithless. He's not doing anything that would show he still has humanity left in him. He is being purely destructive and animalistic in this place. One has to question whether or not it's the 9 years of war that have brought him to this place, whether it's the loss of the foundation of his culture, the time and kleos that now seem worthless, whether it really is just fighting for the love of a friend, and that this love of the friend drives him to realize that human connection is pointless if everyone's going to die on you, so why should Hector even get to live? What is it that's driving Achilles' wrath? And how can we see in ourselves those same emotions, those same desires, those same questions? Hector's death is a moving moment. He begs Achilles to please send him home. And when he knows Achilles will not bring his body back, but will actually drag him behind his chariot, he says, take care now that I don't become the cause of the gods' wrath against you. Because great warrior though you be, you will be destroyed. You will die. If you think of not me in this moment, think of your own mortality and what you will suffer if you do not obey the gods in this moment. Achilles responds to a dead body at this point because he's already killed Hector, and then he talks to him. So there's no humanity even returning in this moment in Achilles. By talking to a dead body, it's not like we see his ability to relate to others. He looks at Achilles and says, lie dead. I will take death at the time when Zeus and the other deathless gods wish to accomplish it. We still don't have someone who's willing to enter into dialogue. He did not talk to Hector reasonably while Hector was alive. They were not conversation partners. It was rather a force of an animal against one who was human. And at this point now, the human one is dead and the animal continues to be destructive. And so Zeus takes the body of Hector and starts dragging it before the city. Unfortunately, this is how Andromache finds out that her husband is dead. She was preparing a bath for him for when he came back from war. The last time that we saw Andromache and Hector together was at the gates in Book 6. And now she hears wailing at the walls, runs again like a mad woman, and sees Hector dragged behind the horses. It's a very emotional scene as we realize that Hector's body is being dragged before his parents, before his mother and father's eyes, and also before his wife's. And that's the end of Hector. Thankfully, it is not the very last scene of the book.